Hi, welcome to this week's edition of the People Progressing podcast. And today I have Coach Jim Johnson out of Rochester, New York, who's been a longtime basketball coach and has served so many people and so many kids up there in New York. And Coach, it's a pleasure to have you on. And I'm just going to start by asking you where you're from, what you like to do, what got you into coaching, what kind of sports you played when you grew up, and so forth. Just give us a little bit background on Jim Johnson.
Sure. So I grew up in a sports family. I was the oldest of six children. I have three younger brothers and two younger sisters, and so there were some wars in the backyard.
I
My
bet.
dad was a teacher and a coach. In fact, I played high school basketball for him. Although he was the only one that coached me, although he coached my younger brothers in youth sports. But my senior year when I graduated, he went into administration, so he didn't coach any of my younger brothers. But so I grew up, and growing up, I played all kinds of sports, and in high school, basketball became my number one love. So I played basketball. I originally just played basketball, baseball, and football, and then I actually found out I was a pretty good runner. So I actually ran cross country and ran track my last couple of years as well as playing basketball. So I played three sports, but my major focus was basketball. And then I went to college. I thought I was a pretty good high school player, but probably better in my mind than a lot of people. I played 1 year of JV basketball. Back then they had JV teams. They don't have it too much anymore. And then I transferred to a school in New York, SUNY Cortland, and their program wasn't very good. So I thought, I'd be in good shape. And they had like 100 guys try out. I got down to the final 18 guys, and then they let me go. So it was a pretty humbling situation. And kind of I went adrift for about a year because basketball had been such a big love. Fortunately, I met a young lady my junior year that kind of straightened me out, and actually been married now for 38 years. And so I got out of college, I was wanted to get into teaching and coaching, and I did coach a lot of different sports. But my real dream was I wanted to be a head coach, and we moved back to the Rochester area. I live in a town called Greece, which is the biggest suburb of Rochester, and I bounced around early in my career. I was actually a head coach at 25 years old, which was pretty young, and thought I was really a good coach. And I did such a great job with that team that I led them to 17 consecutive losses. And I ended up, kind of a long story, but the bottom line is they let me go. And that was another very humbling experience. But actually, from a professional standpoint, it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me because it really woke me up. I was kind of arrogant, at 25, I was a head coach, and it really maybe two things that really were helpful for me was number one, it put a burn in my belly that I was going to prove that school wrong, that
Yeah.
I could be an effective coach. And it never went away, for
Yeah.
the next 30 years. And then the second thing is it really woke me up that I had to become a student of leadership and coaching and building a team. And that's when I really started to become much more of a student, which I'm still a student. I'm retired from coaching now, but I still love learning about leadership and building teams, and that's the stuff that really gets my juices flowing.
It's interesting. Well, let's go back a little bit when you were in college and that you made it to the final 18 and then they let you go.
Yeah.
How much do you think that experience transpired and helped you when you were a coach?
I think it helped me immensely. And it's a great question, Joe, because in reflection, I really had some very interesting in my basketball playing career because when I was in eighth grade was the first time they had organized middle school sports. Till then, it was only high school sports. And so I made the eighth grade team, but I was a really scrawny kid. Although I loved basketball, I didn't play much. So I was, one of the last guys. In fact, to give you an idea, they kept like 20 guys on the team and they only had like 15 or 16 uniforms. So I actually had a t-shirt with a number on it, which
Oh,
was kind of embarrassing, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then I got to high school and I really, I started to mature physically and I was investing so much time. I played on the ninth grade team, and then I moved up to varsity as a 10th grader. So, I made some real progress in 2 years. in my senior, our school hadn't had a lot of tradition of basketball. In fact, we won our first conference championship that year, my senior year, and I was the best player in the team. So I went from a guy that was on like the last guy in my team to my freshman team. I was, a decent player, to my varsity, my senior year, I was the best player. And then I go to college and I don't make the team.
Yeah.
And I think why I bring that up is because it really helped me from an empathetic
Yeah.
standpoint,
Yeah.
in the sense that, because as a coach at basketball, you got to cut kids. And
Yeah.
that was very hard. But I think I was much better at doing it because I had gone through it myself. And I also could kind of go into the shoes because I had been the best player on a team. So I kind of knew that role. I'd been, a guy that was kind of in the middle of the road on other teams. And I was a guy that didn't play much on one of my teams. So so I think it helped me immensely because as a player, I've been in almost every role, including getting cut. So.
And don't you think, Coach, that I have a saying that I think empathy, the word empathy is probably, in my mind, the strongest word in the English language in terms of leadership.
Yeah.
And when you talk about it, and that's what I was looking for when I asked you that question and you brought it up, the empathy, we have so much in common. But the empathy that you have shown over the years in your leadership roles, not just as a coach, but as a teacher and so forth, be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. How important is that for leaders in all different types of industries, business, education, whatever? How important is empathy as a leader?
I think it's extremely important because the leaders that can build teams that bond is that you've got to show that you care, and that's
Yeah.
a big part of empathy is the ability to show that you care, and that you treat people, every person, with respect, whether they're the best player in your team or the weakest player, or, and we'll probably talk a little bit about, or your team manager.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the fact that I'm actually reading a book for the second time. Where the score takes care of itself. It's by Bill Walsh, the guy that wrote it with him. He was actually they didn't complete it because he died.
Oh, okay.
And,
Yeah.
and he ended up reuniting with his son. But it's a wonderful read because he had all these notes, that he was, because they were getting close to finishing the book when Bill died.
Okay.
So, but it's a great book on just the fact that how meticulous he was, but how much that he really did care about people, and that kind of thing. So.
And when you go out and speak, as you go out and speak, you're an inspirational, motivational speaker.
Mhm.
When you go out and speak, how much do you speak to business leaders about empathy and it having people first approach over profit first approach?
Well, I do some different presentations. So when I started, and we'll probably delve into a little bit, but I was part of an inspirational story that kind of blew up
Yeah.
all over the world.
Yeah, we'll
So,
get to it.
that's really how I got into speaking, as I
Yeah.
was sharing that story. And basically, my first presentation was called "Dreams Really Do Come True," where I shared the story and I talked about 6 keys to helping people make their dreams come true. And with the concept that I think most people have a dream, but a lot of people don't think the dream can come true. And,
Right.
and I don't, even if you go through these steps, doesn't guarantee it, but it gives you a much higher percentage of actually doing a lot more than you think you can. But the other thing is, as I got into speaking and I broadened my horizons a little bit, because leadership and building teams is what I love.
Yeah.
And so I developed, a talk on team, and I talk on leadership. And, like I have like this 7-step or keys that I talk about in being an effective leader. And one of them keys is servant leadership. And to me, that's the concept of, if you can flip the pyramid and see yourself as a leader, that you're serving the people that are on your team as opposed to them serving you.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing, going back to the empathy and caring, and, really showing, the old adage, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So.
Yeah, let's go back to, okay, so let's get into the JMax story, Coach. Why
Yeah.
don't you, this is such an awesome story. And this is really how I first learned about you. I showed your story. I used to show it to my class all the time before I
Okay.
even met you.
Yeah.
So why don't you go through the JMax story real quick so people understand it, and then we can go into your 6 keys to achieving your dreams and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So JMac, his name was Jason McElwain. And I'll just give you a very quick background of before. At that point in my career, he came into our program in 2003. And at that point, I was at the school that I finished my career. And in the 20 years I was there, we never had a losing season. We had one division championship, but about 8 years in, we had never won our sectional championship. In New York State, they have 11 sections. And to win a sectional championship, I mean, I've some friends that have never won one,
Yeah.
it's hard to get.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of, my big stumbling block, I guess, as a coach. I had, the famous had won the big one or whatever. And so this young man comes into our program, and he's a little guy. He's like 5'6", 100 pounds. And he tries out for our JV team as a 10th grader. He actually didn't go out for basketball as a 9th grader, so I didn't know him. We were a pretty big school, so I didn't really know him at all. And after a couple of days of tryouts, my JV coach comes in and says, Coach, Jason is not a good player. He's on the autism spectrum. He's learning disabled, but man, he has a big heart and he loves basketball and he loves the kids on the team. I think we should keep him in the program. I said, well, what do you got in mind? He says, I'm going to offer him the team manager. I'm going to let him practice with the team. And that's what he did. And I will admit early on, we had some trials and tribulations. Everybody got used to Jason. But we at that point we built a pretty strong culture. So the kids really they could see that he loved the program.
Yeah.
So they really started to embrace him, and he would sit on the bench for both. He would go to the JV, but he would sit on the bench for the JV game, and then of course during the game he'd be all animated because he was so into the game, and it always would warm my heart when our varsity would come out because he would want to stay on the bench for the varsity game, and I'd see one of my varsity players, straighten his shirt and tie out so he could be ready for the varsity game, and he would be on that. Well, he plays that whole year with the JVs, and he actually got in their last home game. He got fouled on a 3-pointer and he made 3 free throws. That was kind of a nice little thing. And how he got the nickname JMac very quickly is I couldn't pronounce his last name. So one day I walked in, and back then we had a player, Syracuse is about 2 hours from us, and they had a player named Jerry McNamara that they called Mac. Yeah. And he played on their national championship team. And so I walked into JV practice. I said, Jason, come here. And he goes, yeah, coach. I said, Syracuse has GMAC. Why can't Greece Athena have JMac? And fortunately, he liked it. It saved me. I didn't have to say his last name anymore. And so after his sophomore year, what made Jason unique was not that he was on the spectrum or he was learning disabled, was that I was a head coach for 30 years. And I probably could count on one hand the amount of players, if they tried out for the varsity and didn't make it, would try out again.
Yeah.
And if they did try out a second time, they kind of did haphazardly. They would, did invest in the off season. But Jason was totally different. Between his sophomore and junior year, he came to all our off-season workouts and leagues, and I was picking him up, and he was starting to really. I was growing. I just admired his passion for basketball. And so he tries out for the varsity as a junior, and I bring him in, and I said, you're not quite good enough to make the team, but I'd like to offer you the team manager's job. And he quickly embraced that role. In fact, in our first team meeting his junior year, he raises his hand. I said, yeah, Jason. He says, Coach, I got to tell the team something. I said, sure. He says, we're going to embrace this mantra this year called stay focused, and we're going to help you win your first sectional championship. And at that point in my career, I had taken 5 different teams to the semifinals. That's the furthest we ever went. So Jason's junior year, we had a good season. We get to the semifinals now for the 6th time in my career, and we lose at the buzzer to our cross. So we were devastated.
Yeah.
It didn't stop Jason. He was more bound and determined. Comes to everything again. Tries out his senior year, and I bring him in. And this time I said, Jason, unfortunately, I've got some good news and some bad news. He goes, tell me the bad news, coach. And I said, well, unfortunately, you're still not quite good enough to make the team. And you could see this time he's really disappointed because it was just you're trying out. I said, I do have some good news. His head kind of popped back up, and he goes, yeah, coach, what do you got in mind? I said, well, for senior night, I'm going to give you a jersey and hopefully get you in the game. And ironically, that year, Joe, was the most difficult first half of the season I ever had. We had a lot of it. I wrote a book about it called The Coach and a Miracle, and it's too long of a story, but basically it divided the team because of some issues with an assistant coach I had with me for about 6 years. And it was really, really difficult. And Jason wasn't really aware of it. So we were supposed to have a really good team Jason's senior year, and we started well, but then when we had this trauma, it really affected the team, and we really were playing poorly. And I was trying all different things to try to unite the team, and so finally we had lost 3 out of 5 games. We were like 4-3. We were going to this Christmas tournament, and we went in the opening round in a close game. And in the host school, they were really good that year. They're called Fairport, and they beat this team that we had played 2 weeks earlier, and we had beaten in overtime. They beat them by 40 points.
Oh my goodness.
And so the next day, because it was during Christmas break, and on days of games where we didn't have school, we would bring them in what we call a shoot around, which is a short practice for about an hour and just review things. So I bring them in the gym and I shocked them. I didn't bring any balls out, and I sat them in the bleachers and I looked them dead in the eyes and I said, "Guys, I don't want to go to the game tonight." And they kind of like in disbelief. And he said, "Coach, what do you mean?" I said, "Unless we decide we're going to unite, Fairport's going to beat us by 50 points tonight." But the best thing I did, it's one of the things I talk about in effective communication, is I said, "You know what, guys, I don't have all the answers, but you guys got to start sharing some ideas on how we can unite." And they finally opened up, and that's all we did. We didn't bring any basketballs out. It took us about probably an hour and a half. And I'm not saying it cured everything, but it really got a lot out. And where we got back united. And that night we played a great game. We lost to Fairport in overtime, but it really showed what we could do. And then we got this great momentum, won 8 of our next 9 games. And we're going into senior night. Now, senior night that year was in 2006. It was February 15th. On February 13th, they gave J-Mac his first jersey. It was number 52. It was way too big. He didn't care. In fact, there was a rumor going around in school that he slept in it for 2 straight nights.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did.
So the game comes, and for your listeners that aren't familiar with, for senior night, what we do is we honor our players, the seniors, and bring out their parents and guardians. And I'll never forget, because I'll always cherish to see Jason embrace his parents before the game as a senior in uniform instead of his white shirt and black tie that he wore. So the game begins, and we had a good student body following. We had a pretty big crowd that night, and they started chanting at the opening tap, "We want J-Mac, we want J-Mac." And so my dream or thought for the game was I wanted to get Jason with enough time to score a basket. I thought if he could score a basket, that'd be great. Well, I got everybody in after 3 quarters except for J-Mac. So with about 4 minutes to go, I decided the time was right. I pointed to him. He nearly ran out of the court. He was so excited. And then what happened next profoundly touched my heart and soul. What Jason and I didn't know, one of our parents made these pictures of Jason's face, these placards, and he put them on paint sticks. And he gave them to our student body. They call themselves the 6th man. And he said, if Jason gets in the game, show these.
Yeah.
So when Jason enters the game, I had no idea, and Jason didn't either. And they start showing all these pictures, and they give him a standing ovation. And I lose it. I usually don't cry at basketball games. I sit down, and tears are just falling down my face. I'm just so touched how they embraced him coming into the game. Well, now the game begins, and Jason's in his first varsity game. First time he touches the ball, he's got a 3-pointer from the right corner. He lets it go. The crowd kind of stands in anticipation and misses by like 6 feet. It's not even close. And I kid people because this is a public school that I know you're not supposed to pray in the public schools, but I was praying. Well, the next possession, he gets about a 10-foot shot. And this time it hits the rim. I'm thinking to myself, all right, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. And then the third possession, he has another 3, this time from the right wing. He lets it go, and magic, it goes in, and the place just erupted. And I'm thinking to myself, God must be a basketball fan. Not only is scored. He's got a 3-pointer. It can't get better than this, right? Wrong. Well, unfortunately, his idol, I say that because he's now the late, great Kobe Bryant, but that was Jason's idol. He turned into Kobe for the next 3 minutes, and he just starts making shot after shot after shot. And the two things I'll never forget, and I'll give you a quick fast forward story, and then we can talk a little bit about lessons if you like, but is that with a minute to go, I'm still sitting on my chair. Normally I stand up during the game, but I was so overwhelmed with emotion and I couldn't believe what I'm seeing. The tears still running down my face, and I get a tap on my shoulder. I look behind me, and it's Jason's mother, and she is bawling her eyes out. She gives me a big hug, and she whispers in my ear, "Coach, this is the best gift you could ever give my
Oh,
son."
I got goosebumps right now.
I started crying harder.
I didn't know that part of the story, Coach. I
Yeah.
did not know that part of the story.
Yeah, so that was so
Oh,
special.
wow.
And then how the game ends is literally out of a movie scene. Although the game was not close, but with about 10 seconds to go, and I want to give kudos to our opponent. Their coach and players were great sports. It was called Spencerport High School. They score, and our player takes it out of bounds, and normally he throws it to our point guard. But this time he throws it right to J-Max. So J-Max dribbling down the court, and I see the clock ticking down 6-5. I thought they would just let him go, and he'd go in and make a short shot, a layup. Oh no, he pulls up like almost 2 feet behind the arc. He lets go this rainbow, and I'm thinking, Jason, don't shoot for that. It's way too far. You're gonna ruin the moment. Swish.
Oh my God.
I look over, our student body runs on the floor, our players run on the floor. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm living the movie Rudy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then Jason's parents have an interesting dynamic. His dad is 6'6", and his
Oh,
mom
wow.
is 5'2". And you see this little bitty lady going through the entire crowd, and she embraces him. And then our
Oh,
players put Jason up on their shoulders. He's got the game ball over his head. At this point, I had no idea how many points he had scored. And our public address announcer comes on. He says, the leading scorer for the Trojans tonight, J-Mac, with 20 points. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he'd have played the whole game. He scored 160 20 points in less than 4 minutes. And I'll give you one quick last story, and then we can talk a little bit about lessons if you like. But fast forward 4 months later, Jason gets invited. He's up for the ESPY, for the greatest sports moment of the year. And one of the other finalists is his idol. Kobe had scored 81 points for the Lakers in a game that year. So he was one of the 4 finalists. So he was actually going up against his idol, and he actually won the ESPY, beat out his idol, and he got a chance to meet him. So that was pretty cool. So, and then I guess the last thing, I don't know which direction I want to take, but a couple things that jumped out to me. It's one of the things I talk about, the essence of teamwork. As I mentioned, we had a lot of strife. So I knew the kid liked Jason, but I wasn't sure how they would exactly respond. And I never asked them, to do anything special, like pass them the ball. Yet in those last 4 minutes, out of their own hearts, he'd pass them the ball every time.
yeah.
I call that the essence of teamwork, and to shine the light on another person. And in fact, I still see Jason a lot, and I'll kid him. I'll say, Jason, I'm still looking for your first assist. You never passed the ball once. But that was really cool that they were able to do that. And the other side is, I believe, certainly I can't say that it was my intention, but I felt like there's been a ripple effect where I've seen some neat things, with sports stories over the last decade. That was actually 15 years ago. But in my heart, Joe, I felt like I did it for all the right reasons. I wanted to give this kid a chance. We had no media there. In fact, the only media I had is after the game. Back then, we had to call in the score. So I called our local newspaper, and I told them about Jason scoring 20 points. I thought for sure you would get a headline. I mean, how often is your team manager lead you in scoring, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't make much of a deal out of it. In fact, they gave us a headline, but it said Trojans, our nickname, because we tied for the division title that year. And then mentioned just a little bit about Jason in the article. And I was like, I got to admit, the next day I was teaching at the school, and I didn't do much teaching. We watched the game film almost the entire day.
Yeah.
And I remember kids coming up to me and say, Coach, this is going to get on ESPN. I said, ESPN? And get a headline in our local newspaper. But as that turned out, what happened was Jason's speech pathologist, I really didn't know him very well, but he had worked with Jason for 4 years. He came to the game and he was so touched. The next day, he called one of our local TV stations and said, "You've got to come and borrow the video from the coach." And they did, and showed and got a pretty nice response. So the next day, we had most of the local TV stations then, wanted to hear more about the story. And then one of our sports directors called me and said, "Coach, you mind if I send it out nationally?" And I said, "No, if you can make an impact on a country, I think it'd be great." And we were going into our what we call our February break, where our students were off of school, but we were actually starting that sectional tournament. And so it was quiet for the weekend. So I thought, that's where it was going to end. Well, Monday morning, I get up and we have practice in the morning because we didn't have school. And I just before I leave, the phone rings and I pick it up. It's CBS Evening News, and they normally don't call the house. And
Yeah.
"Coach, we've heard about the game. We want to come in and do a story." And they did a story later in the week with Steve Hartman. And after that, it just, by the end of the week, before practice one day, we were interviewed by ESPN, Good Morning America, and CNN. And it was just, and then it just got crazier and crazier because ironically, kind of put the cherry on top. 3.5 weeks later, after that game, we actually won our first Section 5
There you go.
championship instead of
There you
a
go.
sold out crowd. So that kind of, in fact, I kidded people because, you know, it was so crazy for a while. We were getting calls from, lawyers and agents and, people want to make movies and books and all this crazy stuff. And I remember this one lawyer said to me, "Well, Coach, it would actually add to the story if you win your first championship." I
Yeah.
said, "That's what I need, is a little more pressure." But fortunately, we were able to attain that year. And certainly it ended up being, a year I'll cherish the rest of my life. So,
Well, it really unified your team,
yeah.
that whole story, and it helped you guys down the stretch. Like I said, I used to show the video clip from ESPN. I used to have what I call perspective videos. I would show my accounting class and I would just
Uh-huh.
bring them in and show them a 10-15 minute video of something that could inspire them. And that's where I first learned about JMac and you was showing my class that video. They loved it. And every time I watched it, I got chills every single time I watched it.
Yeah.
And the kids were just on the edge of their seats in my classroom watching it. It was
Yeah.
it's an unbelievable story. And you're talking a little bit about your 6 keys to achieving a dream. Why don't you go over those real quick for us? And
Sure.
because I think there's a lot of people out there that are trying to find themselves. I'm going to be doing a find your purpose workshop here in a couple of weeks, and
Okay.
it's kind of going along the same mindset there. How do you help people find their dreams?
Well, in these 6 keys that I talk about in my one presentation, I think it starts with passion.
Yeah.
And it's something that Jason and I had a big passion for, sports, but in basketball in particular. So, I think, one thing, because I've studied a lot about success over the years, and although you can be blessed with talent, but to be really exceptional in something, you got to love it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you got to go through a lot of, the good, the bad, the ugly to be, highly successful. So I think it really starts with a love that you know although you do invest a lot of time and effort, it doesn't feel like work to you,
Right.
because you love it so much. And I think that's where it starts. The second thing, kind of going off your workshop, one of the things I talk about and changed my life a lot as a leader, was understanding my mission or purpose. In fact, one of the things I talked about is to people is, do you have your own personal mission statement? Are you clear about your why, what you're all about? Because when I gained clarity, and it took me some time, I read Dr. Covey's 7 Habits many years ago, and that's one of the things he really emphasized in that book with one of his habits, was the fact that you have to have clarity of having a personal mission
Mhm.
statement. And it took me a while, and he talked about you discover your mission, and now I'm very clear. I when I was traveling the country, I would publicize that my mission was to be an outstanding role model that makes a positive difference in the world by helping others make their dreams come true. And I would share that to my teams, that I'm all about trying to serve and help you be the best you can be. Certainly we want to do this as a team, but I want to see you guys have success. So when I was very clear about that, that helped me a lot as a leader. And I really emphasized that that piece of, because is I think I mentioned you a little bit, is that, most people have a dream. Most people don't think the dream can come true. And what I say is, by going and speaking or sharing, steps doesn't guarantee it. But what I found is you can do a lot more than you think you can. And like I never thought in my life I'd be a published author. I never thought in my life I'd be on the Oprah Winfrey show. I
Yeah.
mean, those things, and you know what? So you just thinking that. The third thing is the old-fashioned one is the clarity of goal setting. We spend a lot of time with our players on individual and team goals and really having clarity of how those two would interconnect. And that was one of the things I talked about when I talk to leaders is you got to help them understand the clarity of how their individual goals fit into the team goals.
Yeah.
And if you don't know both, then I think you miss a really big piece on that direction. The fourth one I talk about is what Jason to me was the essence is, and that's perseverance. What I call that never give up mindset, that you're going to find a way no matter what. And you can read story after story. We've probably all either yourself or seen people that just found a way, overcame all kinds of obstacles. And Jason certainly was a great illustration. The fact that he got cut 3 straight years, but he stayed with it, served our team, was willing to commit, and because of that, I wanted to give him an opportunity. Because one of the things that we used to tell our players all the time, you got to deserve victory, and that's why I think Jason deserved the chance, because he was there every single day. I think it's a really powerful thing. The fifth one is the old Latin carpe diem, the ability to see the day. And I would be lying to everybody if I said, yeah, I expected Jason to go in and score 20 points, including 6 3-pointers. But what I will tell you is that, you know what? He's always one of the first guys to practice, almost always the last guy to leave. He was out in his driveway shooting. So he was preparing himself. So when he got the chance, he wasn't ill prepared. Now, I'm a strong believer in God's, and I think he had something to do with that night, because, to me, that's why my book is called A Coach in a Miracle. But I think the fact that Jason had the right attitude, where the kids really liked him a lot because of, he was a giver to them. And then the other piece is the fact that he spent a lot of time in his game. Even though he wasn't a great player, he had spent a lot of time on shooting, and obviously it manifested that night. And then the last one is being a great team player. And again, I kind of piggyback what I just said, is that I really believe the guys wanted to help Jason, because he was one of those guys. He'd come to practice, you'd see him, rebounding for one of the players on the team. It didn't matter who it was. He was, at the end of practice, he'd always be rebounding for someone, or, and so that was a way that they could give back to him and shine the light on him. As a coach, those are your proudest moments, when you really feel like the team is united and, we're working for common goals, because, that's when special things happen.
It's powerful stuff. I love it. And I'm going to go back to one of those keys that really hit me hard was you have to have the deserve to victory.
Mm-hmm.
So basically you have to work hard enough so that you deserve to win.
Right.
And it kind of goes along with, I have a saying that says fear regret,
Mm-hmm.
because after you win or lose, what I wanted my players never to have was to have regret that I didn't give enough, either in the game or in preparation for the game,
Right.
to deserve a victory.
Yeah.
And I never wanted them to have that regret, whether if we won or lost. I wanted them to be able to look in the mirror and say, I gave everything I could. We just didn't win tonight.
Right.
Then we're okay.
Yep.
And I just love that comment. You said you have to deserve victory. And I just think that is one of the best comments I've heard, and one of the best statements I've heard in a long time.
Well,
And it goes right along with my fear regret statement too. And it's really important for people to understand that, because I think nowadays, Coach, a lot of people out there just think that they deserve to win without putting in the effort to win.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, we went through a trend in society where, we're giving trophies for everything.
Yeah.
And, It's nice to recognize, but I think people got to have clarity of, why they're getting recognized. Are
Right.
they deserving that recognition, not just for showing up? I mean, showing up is part of it, but you got to do more than just show up. And I think that's something that, we taught. And one of the things I really always emphasize with our players is, what are the things we can control? And of the things we can control, are we doing the best we can in those? And I would always talk about work ethic and attitude, and being a great teammate. Those are things you can control. You can't control the officials' calls, or in your case, the umpires' calls. You can't control, the fans. There's so many factors you can't control. So I think if you're going to get a group of people to work well together, you got to really have them zero in and focus on the things they can control and be excellent in those things.
Yeah, and really be conscious of them
Yes.
too. I think that sometimes I say when the noise hits is when you can really find out who a player is or who a worker is if you're in a business or whatever. It's when the noise hits, can they still maintain focus on what I can control type attitude, and then also maintain the people first attitude, I think,
Yeah.
as well. Really powerful stuff, coach. And real quick, where can people find your book?
Yeah, so my book is still on Amazon, but I actually sell it on a discount on my website now. And if you go through my website, coachjimjohnson.com, I sign it, and we give a complimentary bookmark on one of my presentations. My 7 keys to leadership, my 6 keys to making your dreams come true. You get one of those. In that, and also I do a free monthly newsletter people can sign up. I also do a free weekly blog that people can sign up for, and they can certainly follow me. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and I'm just starting to do Instagram. I haven't quite figured that one out exactly, but and I do actually I do a success thought every day. I'm big into quotes. In fact, I used to give my team the way I divided my season up. I actually got this from Tom Osborne, the great Nebraska football coach. He used to break his team or his season into every week. He'd have a theme of the week, and I love that idea. So we used to
Yeah.
do a theme of the week, and we would do uh, with the theme, we would do a quote. Like one week it'd always be on attitude, and one of my favorite attitude quotes is, "Attitudes are contagious. Is yours worth catching?"
Yeah.
And something we would really focus on. Again, the things we can control, but we spend a lot of time on building culture day in and day out. That we were going to do certain things a certain way. Because one of the things I talk about is, to people and leaders is, what is your leadership philosophy? And mine is what I call leave a profit. And simply what that means is everything that we wanted to get involved with, we wanted to make better, not worse. In other words, we wanted to turn to gold, not garbage. And I used to always give an illustration. I learned this from the late, great John Wooden, on how meticulous he was when his teams would travel, that they would never leave a restaurant or the locker room, in disarray. That's something that we always used to talk about. Like when I would walk into a locker room, if I saw a piece of trash on the ground, I would pick it up, put it
Yeah.
in the garbage. Because what I was trying to teach is everything that we touch, we want to make better, not worse. And, starting from picking up a piece of garbage or a towel off the floor, those are all the little things that end up, making you a much better team.
Yeah. It's powerful stuff. And I want people to follow you on Twitter. The first thing in the morning, every morning I wake up and I read
Yeah.
your quotes every morning. They're great. And I know they're inspiring a lot of people. But it is something I look forward to. It's something, it's kind of a gratitude thing for me that I get up and turn, flip my Twitter on and see your quote every morning. And it's a fun thing to do. And I hope people listening to this will do that and get on and follow you and start doing that, because it's really powerful in the way you help people and serve people. Coach, 3 more questions.
Sure.
What's your purpose in life?
Well, that really comes down to my mission, which I did share with you.
Yeah.
Really, is the ability, and the 2 things that jump out to me is I just, for the rest of my life, I want to continue to find ways to serve and add value with people. And the second piece is we've gone through, kind of certainly with COVID, and, a lot of struggle with strife, in many ways. Is the one thing I really want to refocus on everybody is no matter whether we agree or disagree on things, that we're going to treat everybody with respect.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
I think we've lost some of that. And then, and that's the one thing that when I was a teacher and a coach, and now, when I'm out in the community, that whether I liked you or not, I'm always going to treat you with respect.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Okay, second question, because my book is Fighting Your Purpose, Perspective, and Passion. So what's your perspective on life?
Well, my perspective is that I'm a constant learner.
Yeah.
And so I think that the thing with me is it changed my life when I mentioned early in this podcast is, that I lost my first varsity position at 25, but it really made me a journey, because I do another little talk called the 10 questions all effective leaders should be able to answer. And it's all about personal leadership. And one of the questions I ask is, do you have a personal growth plan? Because I think you have to be intentional. If you're not intentional, if you don't grow a little bit every day,
Yeah.
I think you start to die a little bit. So,
Right.
so my perspective is that I'm curious. I want to learn more and more about things on how I can help people, especially in the areas that I love, which is leadership and building teams and that kind of thing.
That's really powerful. And that's why you're on the People Progressing podcast right there. And last one, what's your passion? Coach, what's your passion in life?
Well, that's another thing that, has changed throughout the years. My passion for a long, long time, was coaching basketball. I just loved it, and that part was hard when I retired. Now, my passion, I've always had a passion, for my family. I love my family. And now I have a couple of passions. I want to give value. So I love, speaking. Now, the COVID has been a struggle because now I am doing virtual presentations, and, I've gotten much better at them, but, there's nothing for me like a live presentation. And then the other part is because I've been so competitive in my life, I picked up another sport late in life. I've actually become a very avid tennis player. So I play a lot of tennis, and I have a lot of fun with that. So
Good for you, Coach. I know we got to get going here, but I just want to thank you for coming on. You've made another great week in joining our People Progressing family. And I know this is going to help people. And I hope people can get on your website and you can book you to come over and speak, get your book, get on your Twitter account, and hopefully we'll get you on the Instagram. I'm kind of the same way, Coach. This technology stuff for us older guys is kind of tough, but it's been great getting to know you. You became a mentor to me really fast. Reaching out to you, and you called me back. I was surprised that when you called me back, I'm like, man, this is the guy who I saw on ESPN calling me back, and he's taking his time to spend some time with me trying to get in the same things that you're doing now. And I really look up to you for what you're doing and what you've done in your career and how many people you've influenced and inspired and so forth is what life's about. And I really appreciate you and respect you and hold you in very high, very, very high regard. So thank you for coming on this week, Coach, and best of luck in the next venture that you're going to go. And hopefully we get to see you speak soon.
Yeah, well, Joe, thanks so much. It was a pleasure to spend some time with you, and I really look forward to growing our relationship. I have a lot of respect for you and all you've done, and I love the fact that you're continuing to find ways to serve others. So keep up your great work.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of the People Progressing podcast. I'm Joe White, and it was a great show with Coach Jim Johnson out of Rochester, New York, and talking about JMac and his keys to success and leadership and dream catching and so forth. So again, if you want to get a hold of me, Coach White, Coach Joe White 97 consulting.com. You can get on there and get a hold of me through my email, which is coachjoewhite97@gmail.com. I can come speak to your group, work with your group. You can buy my book on my website and so forth. I just want to thank you for supporting our podcast and keep progressing, keep learning, and keep growing. Thank you.